All right, everybody, welcome to the Finding Your Style webinar, a guide to discovering and developing your unique voice as an artist. I appreciate you guys spending some time with me today. I know that your attention is your most valuable asset, and I promise I won't take advantage of it. I'll move through this as efficiently as I can. This is actually my second time doing this webinar, so hopefully I can leave out some of the fluff and get directly to the point. I want to start by talking about where this idea even came from. If you follow the Fireside Tattoo podcast or the Fireside Technique episodes, you know that we talk to a lot of artists. We answer a lot of viewer questions. And what we find, or what we have found in doing this over 3 years, is that categorically there are really very few questions. We noticed that a lot of people were asking the same types of questions, having the same types of issues, and just wording them differently. So we started making notes of what they were really talking about. And really, to my surprise, this was one of the more prevalent issues. A lot of artists, especially beginning artists, are struggling to find a style, meaning they feel pressured to identify with a style really quickly, and sometimes they end up selling themselves short in the process. So if you've been tattooing for any period of time, I'm sure, I'm sure that you've been asked, what kind of work do you do? What style do you work in? So let's first talk about what we mean by style. When people ask that question, they want you to give them one of these answers. Typically, this is what we think of when we think of style in tattooing: realism, new school, biomech, whatever it is. And I would argue that these aren't really styles at all. These are categories that we have applied just to make it easy for us to make sense out of what people are doing. But for our purposes here today, they're far too general and pretty much worthless. So let me give you a couple of visual examples, since we all draw pictures here and we're visual people. Here is a rose by Jeff Ensminger, who's been on the show several times. Good guy, good artist. This is an older piece of his. I did not ask for permission to use it, so don't rat me out. So you might call this a new school rose, kind of a new take on a traditional rose tattoo, right? Here's one by Phil Garcia, same subject matter. You might call this color realism. But here's the thing. Both of these guys were solving a specific set of problems, right? With the same subject matter. They were faced with a specific set of problems, and they came to completely different solutions. So at the end of these two pieces, they came to completely different solutions to the same problems. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So for our purposes, let's forget these categories, right? Because they weren't categories until someone named them that. And the style that person was working in, that named traditional American was around before the term was around. So let's just get those out of our minds for a second. Biggest question that I've gotten when talking to people about this is, why does it matter? Why would I not just work to the style that my clients prefer? Why not work to be more versatile and more fluent in all styles? Why do I need to concern myself with this? So people like predictability in their lives. They particularly like it when they're spending money, right? So as an example, I'll use the Portrait Society of America. We went to the Portrait Society of America convention this year and did some podcasting, and there's some phenomenal portrait artists there. And, they set up around models and they paint the same subject, and all the paintings were beautiful, and they were very, very unique and specific to the person that made the painting, meaning they were handling the same problems, but their mark making was very distinct and almost like their own fingerprint. It was something that no one else did in the entire venue. So they would line up 20 paintings and you would have 20 drastically different results. The thing is that their results are consistent within their own work. So we're talking about artists that are demanding $10,000, $20,000 for portraits. And think about this. Put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, of the person buying the portrait. You're having a portrait painted of your 4-year-old kid, and you're going to hang it above the couch, and you walk up to an artist and you see a painting that they've done that is applied in a traditional method where maybe they laid down a grisaille and then they started to build up color in thin passes and they started to glaze and it was rich and it looked like an old master's painting. You thought, oh, wow, I love that. That's beautiful. That's what I want. And you flip to the next page of their portfolio and there's this impasto chunky paint and it's piled up and you go, oh, what is that the same guy? Did they both do that? Or did this guy do both of those things? And you flip to the next one and it's almost kind of a cubist, flat color and abstracted shapes and simplified subject and all of that. You wouldn't know what to think, and most likely you wouldn't hire that person. Same thing applies to tattoos. And it's not that you have to focus on one particular thing. You don't have to be the rose guy, or you don't have to be the skull girl. You don't have to be that, but you do need consistency within your mark making, just so that people can make some sense out of what you do. And if you're not exercising constantly to make that happen, then what you'll find yourself doing is just stealing tricks from artists that you like, and that never works. It's very obvious to most seasoned artists whenever younger artists are plugging in tricks that they see online or in their favorite artist's work. So the benefit to doing this, I'm going to give you some tangible benefits here. The ability to become more selective in your clientele, in your subject matter. Less redrawing for clients because they already know what to expect, right? Along with that comes the ability to raise rates, or at the very least raise your minimum charge, so you're able to take on projects that entertain you a little bit more, that you'd rather put a little more time into, and you're not banging out 6 to 8 tattoos a day, unless that's what you like to do. Then you're always welcome to continue to do that. The ability to actually work at conventions instead of sitting there and drawing in your sketchbook. When people start to recognize the type of work that you do, they'll start to seek you out for that. And even if it's not on a national scale and you never make it to 100,000 Instagram followers or whatever, in your own town, I guarantee you most of the artists are not taking this approach, and you'll easily be able to make a name for yourself in your own town. Ability to do high-profile guest spots. I know a lot of people aren't interested in that, but it is really invaluable to be around artists, really high-quality artists on a regular basis. There's almost nothing like it as far as pushing your work to the next level. More freedom of time. You may be able to take on one project a day, maybe 3 times a week as you move along. Recognition and appreciation from peers and clients. We all want the people that we look up to appreciate what we do. Enough said about that. So hopefully I've convinced you. How do I do it? Well, here's the good news. You already have a style. You have a way of making marks that are as unique as your fingerprint. That sounds dumb, but it's true. What you are capable of doing can't be recreated, repeated, or replaced by anyone else. They can try, but they will fail. You just need to apply a framework to the marks that you already make. And the goal in this webinar is to give you the tools, or at least start you on the path to creating this framework for yourself. This reminds me of a story that Jeffrey Hine told me, who is, in my mind, one of the best figure painters on the planet right now. And we were talking at the Portrait Society, actually, about this test that was done that he had read about. And basically, they brought, I think, 16 people into a room, and they didn't know how they were going to be tested, but they basically set them down in a room around a table with a sheet of paper and a pencil, and they said, make yourselves comfortable. We'll be back to give you the test in a few minutes. And so they left, and they left for about 20 or 30 minutes. And the people naturally just picked up the pencils, and as they were talking, they started doodling and making marks and making shapes. Now, these weren't artists. These were just this was just a group that thought they were going to be tested or thought they were going to give their opinions on something. And so, 20 or 30 minutes goes by, and the instructors come back in and they take up the sheets of paper, and that was the test. They were going to analyze the marks that the people made. And sure enough, everyone had made marks, and sure enough, they were all very unique. Some people had, made little cross hatches. Other people had done little doodly swirls. Other people had made marks and gone over them over and over and built them up really heavy. Other people had kept their marks very light and whimsical. But everyone had a unique way of making marks, right? So that's the point here. You already have the style. Our job with this webinar and moving forward, your job will be to apply a framework to make sense out of those marks. So there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of billions of methods, but there are very few principles. So we're going to focus on the principles. What I mean by that, by there are thousands of methods but few principles, is the way that other people are applying, the way that other people are solving problems is their method, their individual method. So there are as many methods as there are artists, but there are a few principles. They're all solving the same problems. Here are the problems: shape, relationships, composition; value. In tattooing, we call it line, but I'm going to try to remove that from your vocabulary today. And we're going to turn line into edges. And color. Literally everything comes back to these. Everything comes back to these. All right? But here's the trick, and this is the challenge for me. People do not understand most of what you say. At least not the way that you intended. So whenever I talk about shape, value, edge, color, these are kind of abstract. They're not literal things, right? So when I bring those things up to you, you don't understand them the way that I intend them. I'm going to give you a literal example of this. Ready? Dog. Okay? I got this from Eben Pagan, and I thought it was interesting, and we can plug it in here. If you don't know Eben's work, you should check him out. He's a smart guy, and he studies the human mind a lot and how we process information. Dog. Do you have a dog in your head? All right, what did you see? Here's the thing. I guarantee that you did not see the same dog that I saw, or the same dog that anyone else is that's watching this saw. I threw the word dog out there. Excuse me. It went through your own filter. You processed it in your own way based on your own experiences, and your mind showed you a dog. Now, dog is simple. Dog is literal. It's tangible. We know what dog is, but we didn't see the same thing. So what about when we talk about things like contrast, or we use terms like dynamic or warm and cool? It's tough, right? It's hard because we all have different ideas of what that actually is. So how do we deal with this issue? How do we learn to use these principles in our own work? How do we learn to identify how other artists have used them, which is invaluable? And that's really what we're going to focus on right now. Keeping in mind that the challenge is we all see different things when we use these terms. All right. So going back, thousands of methods, few principles. We're going to focus on the principles. Let's start with shape. And there you go. Problem solved. Literally, well, almost everything that you see in the world, everything that you are representing in tattooing and drawing and painting comes back to these three shapes or some combination of them, right? Whether you're doing flat geometric work or photorealism, you're dealing with shape. Sphere, cylinders, and cubes are the main shapes that we're dealing with. So how are we going to use them? Well, our job, let's take tattooing as an example, is to establish a hierarchy of shapes, right? And the trick to doing this is, say we're charged with with tattooing a Grim Reaper on a shoulder. We're not thinking about a Grim Reaper. We're thinking about the shapes that make up a Grim Reaper. We're thinking about, where is the star of this composition? Are we focusing on the skull, on the head of the Grim Reaper? Are we focusing, is the skull in the background, and we're focusing more on the hand, the skeletal hand that's holding the Sith? What's the star of our composition? What are the shapes that make up the star of our composition? Are the other shapes supporting that composition? Are they supporting the main elements of the main shapes, or are they distracting of it? Do these shapes fit and flow with the body? These are just the general questions that I go through and ask myself whenever I'm laying out a design. And I think you should too. Value and contrast. Now, to me, this is incredibly important in tattooing. It's important in all of work, in all artwork, but because of the limitations of skin, because of the need for longevity in tattooing, contrast really should be pushed harder than you think it should most times. But we're using contrast, we're using value and strong contrast to support our hierarchy, to highlight our star, right? So anytime we're using a strong area of contrast, we're asking ourselves, now, does this lead the viewer's eye where I want it to go? Is this contributing to the hierarchy within my composition? So we're using high contrast very, very selectively, right? We're only using high contrast to strengthen the composition. Also, we're keeping values in families. And we're going to get a little more into this. I'll use a visual example in just a second. But our lightest darks are always darker than our darkest lights. Our lightest darks are darker than our darkest lights. We're limiting designs to 4 or 5 values, especially starting out. I think the fewer values that you can incorporate and the wider range of values you can incorporate at the same time, the stronger your composition will be and the longer your tattoo will live. And the most important thing is understanding how light reveals objects in the real world. Now, how do you do that? You do it by drawing from the real world. You do it by putting the camera down for a little while, setting up a still life or walking outside and drawing something as it actually looks in real life and paying attention to how light reveals form. Now keep in mind, light is responsible for everything that we see, right? So whether or not you're an artist, if you have eyeballs and are a person and your eyeballs function, you know how light reveals form because everything that you see is light revealing form. So if an artist represents something that's not true to that doesn't follow the rules, you know something's wrong. You don't have to be an artist to know something's wrong. You'll look at it and you'll go, that one doesn't look right. Something's wrong about that. I can't tell you what it is, but something's wrong about it, right? So understanding how light reveals form is vital. It's probably the most vital thing. So let me give you a visual example here. We've got a pretty simple sphere here, and we have light families and dark families. Let's go back and let me point out. I said lightest darks are darker than darkest lights. That's a little bit confusing. I almost have to read it every time. But so basically, we have light coming from the left-hand side here, and this is a very simple example. And when our strongest light is our highlight, then we have this entire light family here, right? From here, from the highlight into our light shapes, into what's called the halftone, which is where the light starts to dissipate but hasn't quite turned the edge yet. Then we hit what's called our core shadow or our form shadow. That's where the light turns. Our shadow shapes come after that. We have reflected light where the light has passed the object and bounced back. This is what we're talking about. Your lightest dark should always be darker than your darkest light. So this reflected light should be darker than any area in the light family here. Now, why is that? Well, because if you could visualize if this were 2 values lighter or even a single value lighter, it would jump out and want to read on the same plane as this. Well, we don't want that shape to jump forward. We want it to turn back, right? So our lightest darks are darker than our darkest lights. It's a simple rule to follow. Now there are exceptions to this, but as a general rule, it's a good thing to keep in mind. After the reflected light, we have a cast shadow. I'll give you just a little tip here. Cast shadows are typically sharper at the edge than your core or form shadow. So as your form shadow turns, it'll dissipate a little slower, and this edge will typically be sharper, just as a rule of thumb. Like I said, all these rules can be broken, but it's good to understand them before you start breaking them. Edges. We have 3 types of edges. We have hard edges, we have soft edges, and we have lost edges. Typically, hard edges are your boldest edge, is going to be in the foreground, softer edges as the shape moves in the distance, and lost edges to create depth and atmosphere. And lost edges basically means that you don't see where the edge of the form transitions into the space behind the form, right? And so when this is used effectively, it's really a great tool in tattooing. I'll give you a quick tip and something that I've been paying a lot of attention to lately. Edge has really been something that's in the forefront of my mind when I'm working lately. And what I've done over the last year or so, as kind of an experiment, is I've stopped lining most of my tattoos on the front end, and I'm using kind of soft or blurred edges and using value and color to make transitions. And then at the very end of the tattoo, now keep in mind this is mostly large scale work, so we're looking at this over weeks and months and whatever. But at the end of the tattoo, I look at the tattoo, I squint a little bit, and I say, where are my 3 to 5 sharpest edges in this entire composition? How can I use those 3 to 5 edges to strengthen the composition and lead the viewer's eye where I want it to go? How do I use it to establish my hierarchy or to highlight the star of my composition, however you want to look at it? And I put my edges in very last. And I think that it adds a lot of depth and a lot of interest to drawings or to tattoos, drawings as well. And I think it's a good thing to try to incorporate. something that edges kind of contribute to and value and shape even more is what is called the rule of threes. And basically what that says is a drawing or a painting or a tattoo should look good from 3 inches, 3 feet, and 30 feet. So there are plenty of tattoos that look good at 3 inches and at 3 feet. Tons that look good at 3 feet. But 30 feet's the trick, right? So if you can draw someone's eye in from 30 feet away, well, you can almost guarantee that it's going to look good from 3 feet and from 3 inches. And the reason is because the biggest problems were solved early on in the composition, right? So we understood our shapes. They flow with the body. They establish our hierarchy. They highlight the star of our composition. Our contrast and our values make sense. The way that the light reveals the form makes sense. And our edges are doing their job by being bold where we need them to be and going completely away where we don't want them at all. So we're using all of these principles to lead the viewer's eye where we want it to go. All right. Finally, color. To me, this is the least important of the principles. That's why I put it last. I really believe that if you have done an effective job of designing your composition and your values are correct, that you almost can't mess color up. Now, you can definitely create mood and things like that with color. You can use color for contrast, whether you're using a complementary color scheme or whether you're using high key colors against muted colors. But here's the way that just for the purpose of this webinar to think about it. Think about your local color first. So when you lay out your composition, let's go back to our Reaper, and if our skull is the star of that composition, what is the local color of the skull? Local color meaning the red of the apple, right? So before you get real fancy and you start trying to put a green light on the left side of the skull and a red underlight or backlight on the other side of the skull, think about what color the skull is. You know, if it's a bone color or if you've decided the entire skull is red, then that's your local color. But think of your local color first, then start to warm up and cool down based on your light source. So if your light is warm, then your shadow area might be cool. Let me back up on that. Your shadow area will be cooler than your light area in that case. People tend to think that light is warm and shadows are cool. And a lot of times you can really disturb designs thinking that way. Your shadow area is cooler than your light area typically, but it's not always cool. There's a lot of warmth in shadows, right? So if you're a painter and you ever find yourself with these dead shadow areas, or you're trying to paint a portrait and it looks like a corpse, just as a test, drop a little warm tone in it, whether a transparent red color or a transparent red oxide, or even a little bit of cadmium orange. Just drop a little bit in there and see if it doesn't liven up that shadow. People tend to overshoot coolness in shadows, and there's a lot of warm shadows. Anyways, that's beside the point. Limit your palette. It's important before you start buying the 200 inks that all of these manufacturers offer that you know why you're using each ink, why you're pouring that ink in the cap. And the best way to learn why to use that ink is to learn how to mix that color, right? So if you're limiting yourself to maybe a warm and cool version of a blue and of a yellow and of a red, along with black and white, and you're able to, by mixing into complementaries or by slightly warming up or cooling down a color, you're able to come up with these off colors. Well, then you'll find, okay, I tend to mix this color a lot. Let me find a tube of that color, and I'll or a bottle of that color, and I'll start using it as a shortcut. But I would definitely say make sure that you know why you're using a color before you just start using colors because you bought it and it's cool and you like the look of it. Familiarize yourself with color schemes. I'm not going to go too far into that now. There are tons and tons of books and tools for getting into to how to use color. Russ Abbott's color wheel is actually a good way, and I'll tell you why. A lot of people confuse color color contrast, or they'll confuse high key colors for deeper value colors, right? So sometimes like the brighter a red is, it's hard to tell where it sits on a value scale, which trumps color. In my value comes first, color comes second. The cool thing about the color wheel is that it is placed on a value scale. So you can look at Eternal's dark red and see if it's darker or lighter than the green that you're using, and you can make that decision based on value, which like I say is more important. There are plenty of other color theory books out there, though. Color and Light by James Gurney is not just on color theory, but it's one of the best books, drawing books and painting books that there is on the planet, in my mind. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back and take a look, and I'm kind of going to wing this. Back to this rose by Jeff Ensminger. Let's look at the problem that he solved, or the series of problems that he solved. What did he do with shape? So this is a single element, so we know what the focal point is. The secondary elements, the leaves, do they contribute to the primary element, the rose? Let's break it down even further and think about, did he use value to strengthen any area or any element within the rose? One thing that stands out to me is that he typically in a traditional rose, they're kind of shaded out from the center. And what he did is he established a light source off to our right. And you can see that we have lighter areas over here and darker areas over here. So while it's very stylistic and it doesn't look like a real rose, he made it believable by introducing a light source that makes sense, right? Also, he's using a full range of values, going from very dark darks to very light lights, and not a ton of values. There are probably only 3-4 values in this entire composition. When you look at edge, what did he do with edge? He used a darker edge on the petals of the rose here. He used a softer edge on the leaves. And he used what will probably be a lost edge by the time it's healed in the pinks here, right? So that edge diffuses and almost falls directly into the skin. So he's using edge to establish space. And you might say, well, no, he just used a black line and then he used a color line. But from a value standpoint, this is a darker, bolder, crisper line, and this is a lighter, less crisp line, and there's no line here at all. So he used edge pretty effectively here. So from a color standpoint, he did something interesting. His cools are in the foreground and his warms are in the background, right? So his brightest lights are kind of this cool baby blue. As he turns into the shadow areas, it warms up. That's more of an ultramarine blue. It's moving closer to purple or red, right? And then into the black. And then he's using his warmest tones, the pinks, in the background, right? So if he had reversed this and put the warm tones in the foreground and let it get cooler as it goes back, it would have completely changed the look of this thing. That was a problem that he solved, and he found a unique way to solve it. Okay, let's look at the Rose by Phil Garcia, solving the exact same set of problems. Compositionally, he did a nice job. It's kind of a triangular shape. It fits the arm well. It kind of drops into a point here. It's bolder at the top. So if you think of the arm as a cylinder, the cylinder gets wider up here. It gets more narrow down here, and he reflected that in the shape. Same thing with value. He has a full value range, right? He's working from dark to light. In edge, this is where he really set him, where these two tattoos really started to separate themselves. He has almost no hard edges. He has no real lines in this, which is what gives it that photorealistic quality, right? He used value to establish some fairly sharp edges, but he didn't use line to do anything. So if you pay attention to where does your eye go first, if it moves into the center here, well, he's got a lot of crisp, clean little value and color changes that make that seem sharp. But then you get into these kind of folds and wrinkles within the petals, and those edges are very, very subtle. They're very diffuse, so they don't jump out and stand forward. If you could imagine if he had used the same sharpness in these textures as he used in here, it would be kind of a cluttered design, and your eye wouldn't know where to go, right? From a color standpoint, he went the other way. While this is kind of monochromatic, our warmer tones, our warmer reds are in the light, and as you move back, they get a little cooler back here, right? So you look into these muted tones, they start to cool off. You look into the background shapes, and there's almost getting to like a magenta or a purple, and you've got warmer reds in the foreground. So, point being, these guys are solving the exact same problems. They're just solving them all. They're solving all these problems in their own way. All right. So inside Fireside, and this is where this webinar is going to change just a little bit, because we have already got our first 12 artists for our Inside Fireside Find Your Style group. The founding members are already 6 weeks into the course, and we're all learning a lot, especially me. But we are going to do this again, so I'm going to go on and run through it anyways. In the Inside Fireside course, we're going to work on these principles one-on-one to help you find your own unique voice within tattooing or within drawing, within art in general, visual art in general. We work one-on-one, helping you to identify and develop your style through a series of projects. And it is a lot of life drawing, so you will be very frustrated, guaranteed, if you're not doing life drawing right now. Weekly individual critiques from Jake Meeks and Adam Shaw. If you're not familiar with Adam Shaw, he's a friend of mine who is one of the best draftsmen that I know. Adam has a unique way of making very few marks and describing a form fully, very quickly. We do life drawing together each Wednesday, and within about 5 minutes, we draw from a model, and within about 5 minutes, he's already completely described the form with the edge of a piece of charcoal by blocking in masses. And he does it so efficiently and so effectively that I thought he was the best one to help me to translate these ideas into a curriculum. If you want to check out his work, it's adambennettshaw.com. All right. So here's the details of this program. It's a 90-day program, give or take. We're still working that out. With this first group, it may end up changing for the second group. There's a video lesson every single week, followed by an assignment. The video lessons come out typically Sunday nights, sometimes kind of late. So Monday morning, you'll have your video assignment. You have all week to work on it. And then individual critiques we do each Saturday, and they're done by email. And typically, we're drawing directly on top of your drawings to help you to see where you can use these ideas more effectively. There's a private Facebook group that is just for the members that has turned out to be the most valuable thing in the entire program, because as we move through this and people start to understand what problems they're trying to solve, they're far more willing to share their work with each other and offer advice to each other, and that has been fantastic. Drawing and reference material are mailed to your door along with a couple of gifts, not for being a founding member, because like I said, the founding members are already in place. What will you get? You're going to get a skull, so that's pretty cool. If you don't have a skull, you need one. We're going to draw a lot from this skull. If you can already tell that it breaks down easily into shapes, we're going to identify shapes. We're going to identify light and shadow, and we're going to have you making your own very unique marks to create a very unique skull. By the end of it all, there's other drawing assignments that aren't centered around the skull, but this is a big part of it. You'll get an Inside Fireside t-shirt, members only t-shirt. Not like members only, but you know. Here's what we expect from you. You'll have to dedicate a minimum of 6 to 8 hours a week. If you don't have that, if you're already drawing like crazy and you can't dedicate that, then I would ask you, please don't contact us, because we really want to help people get to the next level, and it's going to take some effort on your part. We want regular feedback on the program, because we're trying to build this thing over time and make it better with each time that we go through it. And obviously your work would be used in future educational products, because we're going to continue to promote this thing, and we want to be able to say, look at where this person started and look at where they ended up. So if you're okay with that, we'll move on to the next one, the cost. When we move this out to full price, it will be $27.99, and that's because it takes a ton of our time. I mean, a ton of our time. Because it's a beta program, this number is going to change. The first group got in at $8.39. It will be a little bit more than that, but it won't be much more than that. It'll be far less than $27.99. Obviously, 100% money back guarantee, which no one has asked for yet. Fingers crossed. Finance options, we will offer to break it down for you guys. 3 payments. These payments will change because the $8.39 has changed, but we'll break it into a 3-payment pay plan or a 6-payment pay plan. Now keep in mind, this is a 3-month program and we're offering 6 payments. So if that doesn't show you how confident we are in the program, I don't know what will, because I really believe that at the end of the program, you'll say, yes, I got so much out of that I'm willing to pay 3 extra months for it. Just to kind of give you an average return on investment, we were talking about the benefits of being able to be more selective in your clientele and your subject matter and raise minimum rates. Let's say I'm going to use Memphis, Tennessee, where I live, as the average. Let's say you're currently working at about $125 an hour. Let's say you're doing 20 hours of actual tattooing a week. Maybe you're a full-time artist, but your billable hours are only around 20. We're being conservative here. That's $2,500 a week coming in. If you split that in half with your shop, you're bringing home $1,250 a week. Now, if you're charging less than this, then there's probably even more low-hanging fruit for you. You should be able to get up to this pretty easily. So let's say, just for example, you're able to increase by $25 an hour to $150 an hour. You work the same 20 hours, you split it just the same. That's an extra $250 a week, or $13,000 a year. So based on the cost of this program, it'll take you about a month to break even. Or if you want to get Wall Street on this, it's about a 1,500% annual return on investment, which you will not find on Wall Street legally. So how to register. If you are interested in this, like I said, we're in the middle of a program now. We're going to start the next one probably early winter, so it gives you some time to prepare. Email info@firesidetats.com. In the subject line, type "I want in." The first 12 to email us will be sent a link later today with registration information and payment options. Everyone will receive a response. So whether or not you're the first 12, if you're the 15th, we're going to let you know, hey, you were the 15th. Do you want us to keep you on the list in case we do this another time? I think we'll continue to do it because I think we can build it a little better each time based on everyone's feedback. Whether or not you do this, I want to give you a challenge or an assignment. I'd like for you to go out and doesn't have to be a rose, find a flower. Flowers are a good example, and we use flowers throughout this webinar anyways. Draw it from life. No, don't take photos of it. If you don't have a good light source, if you're drawing in the middle of the day, clip the flower, bring it inside your house, set it up with a strong light source, just one light. You don't want multiple light sources. And you're going to focus on breaking it down into shapes and planes. What is the most interesting, or what area do you want to highlight of that rose, and make sure that the other planes and shapes are supporting that. Identify your light and dark families. Work general to specific. So don't try to render each petal from the very start. What's the light side of the rose? What shapes make up the light side of the rose? What shapes make up the dark side of the rose? How do the light shapes turn into the shadow shapes? Think about your halftone, your form shadow, your highlights, all of those kinds of things. Make sure to use a full value range. Try to make your darks dark and your lights light. Try to use few values, though. Try to limit it to 3, 4, 5 values at the most. If you feel like it, you can manipulate the shapes, but the goal here is to make sure that you're keeping the flower believable. Use any medium, and if you want to post it to Instagram with Rose Challenge and tag the Tattoo Improvement Network, we will select 3 or 4 people. We haven't decided exactly how many yet. We'll select a handful of people to receive a live portfolio review via Skype, and we'll review your portfolio using these principles. So it should help you to see where you can make immediate improvements in your own work. That is it. Thank you, guys. If you have any questions, you can ask now. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. And again, I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me, and I hope to see you inside Fireside. Have a good day.